key modern railways. In-depth railway news.
Hello and welcome to the preview of Modern Railways February 2021 edition. As you can see, we're back in the studio again, since apparently taking photographs of trains is not essential. But fortunately, we have quite a few in stock. As it happens, I shot a bit of video between lockdowns for my bit, so I'm sorted. Here's the cover. Very nice too. Smart looking train. Although this business of not putting numbers on the front of units drives me nuts. It's a Class 730, by the way, 730. The new Class 69 also gets a look in as well, even though it hasn't even painted yet. So, back when I worked at the Railway Technical Centre in the 1980s, I used to say the real running railway might as well not be there, as we would barely notice a difference. At least in the current crisis, the railway is still there, even if us old codgers can't travel on it. Still, somehow we keep finding things to write about, and as you will hear from our editor, Philip Sherratt, there is more going on than you might think. Philip, what have you got for us this month?
Thanks, Ian. So, as you will see from the magazine's cover, we have a West Midlands special for you this month. Now, the lead feature is based on an interview I did with Malcolm Holmes from the West Midlands Rail Executive and Julian Edwards from West Midlands Trains. We had a wide-ranging discussion talking about the impacts of COVID in the immediate and also the nearer term, how it would affect service patterns, and also how it's affected plans for investment, as the franchise has new trains on order from Bombardier and CAF, electric and diesel respectively. There are also plans to expand services in the West Midlands. New stations are in the offing on the Camp Hill line in South Birmingham and on the Walsall to Wolverhampton line, and there's also ambitions for a new station at Aldridge on the Sutton Park Freight line. So all interesting projects which have implications for timetables, and we discuss some of that and the traction options which could potentially include battery EMUs. There are also station refurbishment projects at Perry Bar and University, which are linked to the Commonwealth Games, scheduled for 2022. So it's a wide-ranging article which is looking at short, medium and longer term options, and there's some quite interesting potential changes that you could make responding to the way things will be post-COVID. That theme's also picked up in an article from Helen Waters of Steer Group. Steer has been working as part of a task force to improve services in the West Midlands recently, and Helen's article reflects on that work and also how COVID has shaped the work that Steer has been doing. A really interesting article, I think, is about Very Light Rail. Now, this was prompted by the Railway Industry Association's Unlocking Innovation webinars just before Christmas. Very Light Rail is a concept of developing a lower cost, lighter-weight vehicle, and there were two demonstrator vehicles being developed. One is for branch lines on heavy rail networks, and that's a battery diesel hybrid. So that's suitable for lines where you might have a DMU at the moment, but you want something that's a bit cheaper to run. And obviously a bit more environmentally friendly. With the battery you could run in and out of stations. But the main focus of the article is on the second demonstrator, which is a tram replacement. So this is a very lightweight, quite small vehicle, which would be used to replace conventional trams, and the City of Coventry has embraced this idea and wants to develop a very light rail network as part of a system of mass transit lines. The plan is not just to have a lightweight low-cost vehicle, but also to have a new track design, and while the big problems of tram systems is when you dig down to build the track, you then come across utilities. So the idea is you have a much shallower track design, instead you don't come across utilities, and therefore it's much cheaper to build. Completing the West Midlands symmetry to this is the development of a Very Light Rail Innovation Centre at Dudley, and that's designed to bring the development of this technology together. And it's something that the UK is leading on, and there has been interest from abroad, so it's potentially a very exciting example of building a new industry, and if it helps us to do things cheaper and be more environmentally friendly, you'd think that's got to be a good thing. Elsewhere in the magazine, we have a feature about the Trans-Wilts line. So this is the Swindon to Westbury line through Melksham in Wiltshire, and it didn't used to have very many passenger services. It's recently had a 2-hourly service, but the Community Rail Partnership wants more, and they'd like an hourly service and expansion of services so you can reach more destinations. So my colleague James Abbott visited the area back in November, just before the lockdown was introduced, and spoke to Paul Johnson, who heads up the Community Rail Partnership. One thing a railway can't operate without is track. It's not a subject we cover very often in Modern Railways, but we have an article in this issue reflecting on the various components of track and the supply chains related to them. So the rails themselves, ballast, switches and crossings, and so on. And this is a quite interesting reflection, and certainly I learnt a lot from it. So thanks to Peter Hoyebeck, who wrote that for us. And then lastly, but certainly not least, it's 25 years since privatisation this year, so we're reflecting on that from a freight perspective, and Julian Worth, who's written a number of articles for us before, is very well placed to reflect on that journey. There were big ambitions at the time of privatisation that EWS had to expand freight and grow the market. They've sort of come to fruition, but not quite in the way that was originally envisaged, and Julian tells that story for us in this issue of the magazine. So those are the main features for you. We have all the usual columnists and roundups of developments going on the network, and I'm sure there's plenty of interest in there for you, hopefully something for everyone. So as I always say, don't forget you can buy the magazine in the shops, or subscribe or buy it direct from the Key Publishing shop, or you can get it digitally too. So with that, I shall hand back over to Ian.
Thank you, Philip. Loads of good stuff there, I'm sure you'll all agree. Sometimes you hear people say, who polices the police? And who regulates the regulator? Well, here is your answer. Next up is our own Captain Deltic, Roger Ford, freed from numerical challenges of the Golden Spanners last month to roam across the rich plains of railway landscape in search of prey. And he's found some. Over to you, Roger.
Hello. I don't know whether it's the prolonged effects of lockdown, but this month's column is a bit snarkier than usual. And first in the line of fire is the Office of Rail and Road. Back at the end of 2019, they decided to launch a market investigation into the supply of signalling equipment, obviously worried that Network Rail might not be getting value for money. With the advent of lockdown, they paused the inquiry, but back in November, they decided that it was time to start again, because obviously people had more time on their hands with not much else worrying them. And the consultation document, when I finally got into it, revealed a worrying lack of knowledge about the market they're investigating and the availability of competition. So I've gone into that in some detail. And one of the things I found, for example, is they were worried. They seem to think that ETCS is some new technology, although it's been in service for coming on for 3 years on the Thames link. And also, as for competition, when you've got 5 firms supplying ETCS already in the UK market, and CAF lined up to come in if they have a chance, you do wonder why you need an inquiry. The second item is, well, it's more a bit of fun than snark. Recently, LNER issued an OJEU notice looking to add 10 more trains to their mainline fleet. Now, they've got something like 65 Zoomers, and you'd think that the obvious thing was to go to Hitachi and strike a hard deal for another 10. But no, of course, that's not the way engineers and managers in the railways have ever worked. They all want to be Gressy or Stanier and have their own trains. And so we have quite a hilarious specification, including a number of variants such as hydrogen electric hybrids. Anyway, so I have a bit of fun with that. Then we go on to the serious stuff, which is the rise of the hybrid diesel train. As you know, Joe Johnson, when he was briefly Transport Minister, declared no more diesel trains after 2040. But what he really said was no more diesel-only trains. And so what the Roscoes are doing, who obviously want to keep their trains in service as well as reduce environmental impact, are developing battery hybrids for a Turbostar, a Network of Turbo, and now Hitachi have got in and they're offering to develop a battery version of the Class 800. This leads me to think about where else you might employ battery hybrids, and the obvious answer is on the cross-country, which is the biggest producer of CO2 of all the TOCs. And the Voyagers are overpowered, have lots of diesel engines, so I suggest we might revive Operation Thor, which was the idea of fitting an electric pantograph transformer car, to Operation Volta, which would turn them into hybrids. Another item I came across on hybrids comes from North America, where Wabtec and BNSF, the freight haulier, are developing a battery locomotive which would run in consist with 2 diesels. This would mean that the battery would provide traction power as normal. It's a very big battery, but it would also enable regenerative braking, which would save fuel, reduce emissions. I did wonder whether that was relevant to the UK market, but talking to people, it might be. After that, we have the Tin Watch as usual, where we say farewell to the Hitachi 385s, which have been promoted, having reached 50,000 MTIN and are now part of the regular fleet. And competition at the top is very tight. But the real news on Tin Watch is that the Rail Delivery Group, which is responsible for these statistics, is looking to a new metric which would bring in a wider range of faults than those that are used for MTIN. A tin starts when a train has been stopped, when Trust detects that a train has stopped for 3 minutes. And there are a number of technical incidents, as I say, but there are a wider range which is believed inclusion of which would probably reflect more the passenger's experience of delays. I give a brief note on what this is all about, but I'm looking forward to having a session with the Rail Delivery Group experts on how it goes. So that's what's in the magazine this month, in the column this month, and I hope you enjoy it. Goodbye.
Thank you, Roger. I do wonder if when people in authority write these reports, do they consider that someone might actually read them? If they did, it might help. So, to finish off, it's my Pan Up column. And as regular readers will know, I do love a new locomotive, although they don't come along very often. This month we get a preview of the new Class 69. What's that? It's not new? Well, it nearly is. I suppose you could say it is the locomotive formerly known as the Class 56. Pretty much new as far as what's inside it is concerned. This does give me a chance for a bit of reminiscence about the early Class 56 days at Cardiff Canton. Not that I had a lot to do with them myself, but they did give me the chance to say that my old DMUs were not the most unreliable trains in the depot. Superannuated anorak Steve Morris shares some of his experiences from the hot seat at the time, and I talk about the new loco, which in short is a Class 66 inside a Class 56. Well, nearly. This all might seem an odd thing to do. Why not build a new loco? Well, there are a number of good reasons which I discuss in the article, and I hope you'll find these more interesting than just me telling you what bits are inside it. All being well, the first one should be out on the Severn Valley in February, so you'll know all about it by then. In the heady days of December, when we could go out for a walk with more than one person, the best part of my day was a walk out with 2 of my grandkids. Occasionally I managed to work this to be near the railway, and taking the kids set me thinking how we would like the world to be a better place for them, and that got me on to emissions. Strangely enough, the EU emissions regulations are the reason we can't build a new locomotive of the power we want without some radical thinking. And I don't mean why don't we change the regulations. The amount of energy used in shifting freight about has gone up a lot from when we used to use 1 horsepower canal boats. They would make their way along the Trent and Mersey Canal, and here at Stenton Junction we have the canal, the railway, the road, and even freight by air passing overhead. Worrying about the black exhaust from the odd freight train seems a bit odd when it is by far the most efficient way of shifting freight. But I'm not saying rail should be exempt. Maybe there should be a bit of leeway for a means of transport 4 times more efficient than road. Make that 6 if we extended electrification. But modal transfer is the way the rail industry could make a real difference. And I make some suggestions as to how that could be better achieved. Well, that's it for this month. We hope you enjoy it and it keeps you amused if you're confined to barracks. Although industry news isn't that encouraging just now, I feel I should go out with an uplifting message. So remember this. the Department of Transport is not organising the vaccination programme. Thank you and bye for now.
Visit www.keymodernrailways.com for more interesting and essential information about the British Railway Network.